Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. As always, we appreciate you spending some time with us. Remember to head on over to YouTube and subscribe. And of course, you can find personal pages at Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Well, it's always good stuff when I can have a guest that has the same first name as me. And today we are joined by speaker, author, and consultant who is helping leaders and teams get better, Kevin DeShazo. Kevin, how's it going, man?
It's going fantastic, man. I'm excited to hang out and chat for a little bit. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you spending the time with us today and just connecting. I know we don't know each other extremely well, connected over social media, and you're a great follow, somebody I think that provides a lot of content. So let's just dive right into like what are some of the specific things that you do to help teams, individuals get better, as you would say?
Yeah, so kind of my story is I was doing social media training for college athletes and coaches and administrators for a number of years, and I just saw a gap in leader development in that space. It's not unique to that space, right? That's just where I spend most of my time, and saw that most leader development was bring in a speaker, right? Or let's do a book study, or let's go to a conference, and those things are all good, right? They're all okay, but it's like a church camp pie. We're fired up afterwards, like that was amazing. What are we gonna do about it now? And then 2 weeks later, we're kind of back to where we started. And so I want to try to help kind of close that gap between kind of inspiration and application, and which ultimately, not to use a bunch of buzzwords, but to try to lead to transformation, right? It's like if I want to help an organization get better, well, that means they have to have better teams. Well, if the team's going to get better, they've got to have better leaders. And so we just have a lot of content. I partner with an organization called Giant. They do global leader development with companies like Google and Pfizer and Delta and Chick-fil-A and the U.S. Air Force, and down to mom and pop shops. And so I've just been taking a lot of the stuff that they do, partnering with them to bring into the sports world, to help leaders get better, right? Leaders define culture. So if we can create a common language, raise the level of communication and relationship, then we can actually solve some of these deep culture issues.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's extremely applicable, everything that you're doing, and much needed. I'd be interested to know, like, over time, you have seen like a ton of leaders, right? Good and bad, which we'll maybe get to both. But let's start with the positive. Like, what have you seen in quality leaders? What do they have that these other ones don't, or that they're lacking?
Yeah, I think one of the key things, and this isn't sexy, but self-awareness. Right? You can't lead others well unless you can learn to lead yourself well. And so I've never seen someone complain about a leader working too much on themselves. Like, gosh, she's just always trying to get better and like reflecting on herself and working on herself. Like, what's that all about? Nobody's ever making that complaint, right? We complain like, man, does he ever look in the mirror? Like, does he know what it's like to be around him? So I think self-awareness is such a critical thing. I think we talk a lot about self-preservation. And so this desire to like prove yourself, or being afraid of losing something, reputation or job or influence or whatever it may be. But the flip side is just to be secure, humble, and confident in who you are. Like, I know who I am. I know what I bring to the table, not an ego thing, but I'm confident who I am. I have the humility to know, like, I'm not done. There's a lot that I don't know. There's always room for improvement. And just this security of like, I don't need to prove myself to anyone. Right. Again, not out of ego. It's like, whether you think I'm great or not doesn't change who I am. And so this just being secure, humble, and confident allows you to multiply those good things in other people, right? Leaders are multiplying. And so healthy leaders multiply and create healthy teams.
Well, it's so funny that you brought up self-awareness. I was going to go to it later, but let's stay on it before maybe we go to some things some leaders need to work on that you see. I would argue that self-awareness is our biggest asset as a leader, and so I was going to kind of ask where he stood on this and if you agree, but I think you do. But like, why is this such a struggle for everyone? Why can't a leader, it's one thing of what I perceive myself to be. It's another of what others perceive me to be, right? And whether that's finding that out in personality tests or conversations, that's two totally different things. So where is that gap? Why is that such a struggle?
Yeah, I think too, leaders, we never consider what it's like to be on the other side of our leadership. And a lot of that's because we're afraid to be vulnerable. We don't want to hear that answer. We think we know everything. We think we know enough. Our way has worked, quote unquote, whatever worked means. And so we are, I think we have a culture of people, and I'm generalizing obviously, but people who are just trying to be comfortable. And if you're comfortable, then you don't want to examine yourself.
That's right.
You don't want to work on yourself. And so it's easier and more comfortable to tell our team, hey, you guys need to get better. But to be willing to look in the mirror and say, man, I've got broccoli in my teeth. How long has that been there?
Yeah.
Why didn't somebody tell me?
That's great.
But to be able to identify it yourself, then you can, because we're all messed up, right? We all have issues we got to work through. It doesn't make you weak. It just makes you human. And so I think another thing with leaders is we're so afraid of looking weak and admitting we don't have an answer. We did the wrong thing. It's like, no, because we want our team to do that.
Yeah, right.
Right. It's like, if we can do that, they can do that. And so this idea of self-awareness, again, it's not sexy, but we have a saying we use all the time is you never graduate from the school of self-awareness. You are always, always, always learning about yourself. If you're trying to get better, that's the first step is you start with you.
Yeah, that's great. I kind of just want to pause to make sure people are hearing some key words in what you just said, because to me, vulnerability is a huge one. It's almost become wrong in society in a leadership role to be vulnerable, because then it's like, well, why don't you know this? You're supposed to, you're in that role. And it's easier to be critiqued than when you're vulnerable. But I think being transparent and authentic with that is so, so key. And to reiterate one other thing, Kevin, is it's being comfortable, like getting out of your comfort zone. If I've talked about it once, we've probably talked about it dozens of times on here. Like, it is so crucial to your growth, but yet some people just don't want to do that, do they?
Well, and it's fascinating because this is the hypocrisy of leadership is we'll say all these things to our team, right? Guys, you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Well, leader, when the last time you got uncomfortable? Last time you were willing to be challenged or critiqued or held accountable. So that's the thing with leaders, is that we love to talk about these things. We love to talk about accountability. Well, as soon as somebody tries to hold us accountable, we're out. Like,
Yeah.
we shut it down. And so this idea of, and I heard someone phrase it the other day. It's not about it. It almost becomes a negative to say get comfortable being uncomfortable. Just call it your growth zone.
Yeah, right.
Because that's what you're doing,
That's
right?
right.
When you're uncomfortable, you should be growing. And so it's almost like if we can rephrase it, it's like, man, live in your growth zone. Oh, well, that's where I want to be, right?
Yeah, that's great. I literally had a buddy told me the other day how crazy I was, not to put me up here, but it's like one of my prayers like 2 weeks ago. It's like, all right, I need to be uncomfortable. Make me uncomfortable. What is it that you can bring me? And I think we're alluding to some of these things, but I'd still like to see if there's anything else that maybe we're not talking about. Like, where do you see leaders mess up or fall short? Like, where are some common mistakes, or what are some common mistakes maybe that they're making? Once again, I know you alluded to some, but is there anything else before we move on?
Yeah, I think one thing that leaders do, and it's really interesting because as we're moving up the ladder of leadership, so to speak, and I'm talking in terms of like title and positional influence, we work hard to collaborate with people, right? We want to serve people, we want to fight for other people. The higher we get up that ladder, the less of that we do, and it feels like the more responsibility we get, the more positional influence we get, the more isolated I see leaders becoming. And it's that self-preservation. They don't want to be found out. They don't want to be seen. And it's, I'll say this, nobody's waking up deciding to be a bad leader, right? Like, nobody wakes up like, man, I want to be a jerk today. Like, I want to just not communicate well. I want to disconnect from my team. Like, I want to make life miserable. But they're not choosing to not be that. And so that self-preservation, that insecurity drives negative behaviors, and they end up isolated. They end up not doing the things that they know should be done, and the things that actually got them to that chair in the first place. And so it just becomes this unhealthy cycle. And so I think when a leader is becoming more and more isolated, which is pretty typical. Leadership can be, it's interesting. We hear all the time leadership can be really lonely, but it doesn't have to be. Like we design it that way out of our own insecurities.
So how do people get, if they're caught up in that, Kevin? Like, how do they get out of that cycle? What are some things that they can do, to not fall into that trap? And what I would say is establish that daily discipline, or have those habits incorporated in their life.
That's the key, right? It's like so we use a formula called the change equation. And so you're wanting to change, right? You're wanting to get healthier. You want to be more connected to your team. You want to be whatever it is. Maybe you want to run a marathon, lose 30 pounds. Well, so there's a vision, right? That you have, again, the marathon, the weight, the health, whatever. Well, there's also a level of dissatisfaction right now to say, like, as a leader, I'm dissatisfied with where I am. If you don't have a vision for where you want to be as a leader, like, you know what? I actually want to be connected to my team. I want to have a better culture. I want to be a healthier leader. If you don't have a vision, that dissatisfaction leads to like bitterness and hopelessness and a lot of frustration, because like you're just unhappy, but you don't know where you're going. And when you don't know where you're going, you don't know what to do about it. And so when that dissatisfaction is way up here, but the vision is down here, it's like we get stuck. And that's where I think a lot of people in general are. But when the dissatisfaction is here and the vision is above it, right? It's like I'm unhealthy, but I know what a healthy version of me looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that mountaintop. So like I know that's the direction I need to be going. Well, then you add in the natural next step. And so for leaders, we're typically impatient. We want to climb that mountain today of having a healthy team, of being connected to our team, of not being isolated. It's like, no, you take a step today and another one tomorrow. Like baby steps are still steps, you know? And so that's the piece, is like to break it down to that natural next step. Then that becomes, to your point, the daily discipline, the daily habits.
Right.
But you've got to create a culture around you where those habits are the standard, not the exception, right? If I want to get healthy, but my family culture is we eat out all the time and we have a lot of unhealthy snacks around, like I'm not going to choose to be healthy. That's the exception. If I want it to be the norm, then I've got to change. Okay, we're going to cook at home a lot more. We're going to change our snacks in the house. And so to look at your personal culture, how is it shaping your personal habits?
Well, we're going to segue right into that buzzword next, but I think what you're saying is kind of what maybe I tell my 3 boys at home every day. It's like, here's your expectations, here's your habits. You either need to lower your expectations or raise your habits, right? Because so many people want to, we all want this. And I don't say this in an arrogant way, but I think we all know what the secret to success is. But do you have the habits and the daily discipline to get where you're at, to do that individually and once again create that culture? So you mentioned culture. I mean, that is a buzzword that everybody knows about. That's the $1 million buzzword probably right now, right? But let's dive into that kind of with the same approach as we did with leadership. Why is it so important, to have such a quality culture?
I think and to your point, it is a massive buzzword right now, to the point that it's become almost ignored it's because so many leaders talk about it while not knowing how to build it. Right? Like there's a viral video, I think it's a year and a half ago, right around the end of March Madness, and it was all these new coaches getting hired, right? And it was like culture. We're going to change culture. We're going to fix culture. We're going to be about culture. And half those coaches will get fired because they can't build culture, right? And that's not necessarily a knock on those coaches. It's become the popular thing to talk about. But as we've studied organizations, it's like a lot of organizations have leaders who are brilliant, who understand business or sports or whatever their industry is, right? Education, healthcare. A lot of organizations have really smart, really intelligent, really capable leaders. They have really good business plans, really good practice plans, really good strategies for how they're going to quote unquote win, right? Again, whatever winning looks like in their world. And those are all good. And we need those, right? Like we need good leaders or smart leaders. We need a good strategy. We need talented teams, right? And most organizations, I think, are full of talent. Rarely is a performance issue a talent issue. Sometimes it is, but rarely is it purely a talent issue. It's a culture issue. When you create the right culture, people perform at a higher level for a longer period of time. And that's, for me, that's really the key indicator of culture, is like you can win. So, we're talking sports, basketball, you can win the championship this year and have a bad culture. Like nobody wants to talk about that, but you can win this year and have an unhealthy culture.
Agree.
Absolutely. You won't win it again next year, or again the next year, or again the next year, because a healthy culture won't last.
Well,
when you have, go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Kevin. I want to, because
No.
what you're alluding to, I want you to jump in right in on this and keep going. So thank you for allowing me to interrupt you here. But you're talking about such a key word, sustaining, right? Like, so keep going with where you're at, please, but don't miss that point, because I know you've talked about it before, and give kind of more of the how. So thank you once again. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's it. It's because we think because we won the right way, or that we have the right culture. No, you won because your people were compliant, and because they were operating out of fear, and they just wanted to get through this season. And then when the season's over, like, man, that was miserable. I don't want to see a basketball for 6 months. I don't want to see these guys for 6 months. And people are like, but you won. Like you won the title. Like, I don't care. And winning should be fun. Like, of course it's hard work. Of course there's adversity and all these things involved. Like if you're operating at a high level and not having fun, there's something wrong. And that's why it's not sustainable if you have an unhealthy culture. But you look at the sports world, the Dukes, the Alabamas, the Clemson, the UConn women's basketball. I mean, the same teams, the Patriots, are competing Doesn't mean they're always winning, because you can't guarantee that, right? Like we also need to get rid of this idea that culture guarantees a specific result. So much is out of our control. But if you're competing consistently for a title, if you're consistently giving yourself a chance to win at the highest level, then you have a healthy culture, because it's people are working their tails off. They're dealing with adversity. They're having difficult conversations. They're overcoming obstacles, but they're loving each other along the way. They're getting better along the way. They see the value of all the work along the way, and they want to keep going. And so that's the key. Like you said, it's sustainable. Like, are you performing consistently? If not, we need to look in the mirror and change some things.
And earlier, you talked about comfort. I see adversity that you just mentioned there. I see fear. A lot of these things seem to get in the way. And don't you think that the healthier cultures embrace that and understand that it's valuable for them?
Absolutely. Right. Because we also, and this is probably just a general cultural thing. We try to remove barriers, remove obstacles, and it's like life is just full of them. Like, you can't control it. Now, you don't want to be doing things that are cause obstacles, right? But it's like, at some level, if you're on the path of getting better, adversity is just part of it. That's what you've signed up for. And so if you know that going into it, it's like, hey, from between now and here, who knows? Who knows what happens? Like, who knows what shows up? We can only plan for so much, but we can plan for adversity, even though you don't know what it's going to look like. It's like, we know adversity will show up. Adversity is not a reflection of your culture, right? Like, good and bad teams face adversity. It's what your culture determines how you operate through that adversity. But the best teams know, best leaders know, that's actually what makes us better. Because if you get refined in the fire, right? Like, don't tell me about your culture unless you've been through the fire. Don't tell me about your character unless you've been through the fire, because otherwise it's just a talking point. But when you've been through the fire, then you've been refined. You've looked in the mirror. You've done the hard work. And it's like, the next time that fire shows up, you're like, I've already made it through one. Game on. It may not go as I expected. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be difficult. But I've made it through one fire. I know I've got what it takes to get through this fire as well.
Yeah, it's not really a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think I read this the other day on Twitter. Heck, might have been your timeline, but it's like, it's our choice. Like, marriage, divorce, both are hard. I get to choose my hard, I mean, and I could go on and on with other examples, but I think that's the great thing, is you have that choice, and that's a separator to me that I see. Where does I'm so big on this. This is probably just my approach as a player and then as a coach. I think it's everything, but where do you fit with mindset? To me, it is everything, and there is like you said earlier, there's that line and that balance between cocky, confident, to also having confident and knowing that everything is a process. But I'm wired in a certain way when I approach things that I don't always align with on other people, So where does mindset fit into all this for you?
As you said, it's everything. I mean, it really is. And we're starting to realize that it's become more of a talking point over the last few years. But man, mindset, like, life before anything else is a mental battle. And so if you don't win that battle, don't show up. And I don't mean that negatively or critically of people, but you're so limiting your potential and your chance to have success if you don't have the right mindset. How you believe determines your behavior. Like, so I think the next book I'll do is on this idea of belief. It was going to be this one, but got distracted. But like, belief is everything. You either rise to your level of belief or you fall to your level of unbelief. And again, that's not an ego thing. It's believing, like, you and I were not made on accident. We were not made to be average. Okay, if I can get that, if that can click, well, that means I can't show up the same today as I did yesterday. I've got to show up believing that. And if I believe that, then I will live that out. And I'll also want to make sure everyone around me gets it about them. Like, hey, all of us, like us as a team, hey, we weren't made to be average. Let's go for it. Stop thinking in an average way. Average thinking leads to average living. And again, I'm not talking about like money or houses or possessions, right? It's your potential, it's your impact, the influence that you build with others. And so the way you believe mindset, I mean, it's such a critical thing. And to your point earlier, that's a discipline. That's a habit. It's an everyday. You don't wake up with good mindset. Like, you're not going to accidentally have an awesome mindset. It's a choice every day. And it's a muscle that you work out, right? The more you work out, the muscle mindset, the better you get at it. You'll find you have a lot fewer bad days because you have within a year, like, man, suddenly I believe pretty well. I'm pretty strong mentally. But if you ignore it, like your muscles, it atrophies, you get weak, and you get taken out by completely unnecessary things.
Now, you have more exposure to this due to what you're doing than I do. I had exposure to it when I was coaching, and I would say I saw it more in the latter years than I did at the beginning. But I feel like a lot of kids, this is why we're hearing of some of these struggles that they're going through, and whether it's, dealing with internal issues or whatever it might be, what is missing maybe in this generation or just as a whole, if you are being exposed to it, like I'm saying, like what are you seeing out of kids right now? Why is that? Because if I went back and recruited tomorrow, I know talent trumps all, but mindset to me and ability to be resilient and get out of your comfort zone, all these things we're talking about, I would start there any day of the week and be fine with that team.
All day, every day, right? Because like you said, talent matters, clearly. A talented kid, talented person with a weak mindset, they're a liability. And I don't mean we write them off. I mean, we just have to see, like, wait a minute, can I coach? Can I help them get better on mindset? Or are they in a place where they're even willing to be coached when it comes to mindset? Because otherwise their mindset's going to undermine their talent. I think with this generation, and we have to look at this as it's on us as parents. And I've got 3 boys as well, but we look at leadership through a lens of, of support and challenge. High support and high challenge. So high standards, high expectations, high accountability, high love, high encouragement, high relationship. When you get those two, people want to run through walls, right? It's the best coach you've ever played for, best boss you've ever worked for, best mentor you've ever had. Well, this generation for the last, let's just say 20-ish years has been raised in a high support, low challenge culture.
Yes.
Right? So high encouragement, high, you're awesome, you're the best, low challenge, low accountability, low expectation, which leads to a mindset of safety and comfort, but entitlement. What I'm doing is the right thing because nobody's telling me to be different. And it's all been done with good intent, right? We're just trying to protect our kids. And we actually call this a protector style of culture. But what you're protecting them from doing is growing.
Yeah, right.
Because you're not saying, hey, I love you to death, but you need to be doing this. This is where you're falling short. I'm not calling you out. I'm calling you up to remind you of who you are, to say this level of behavior, this level of effort, this level of fill in the blank. And that's not the standard. That's not the expectation. And so we've created a generation of kids who we've labeled them entitled, but we've created it.
Yeah.
We've raised a generation of entitled people. They want accountability. They want to be held to a higher standard. They just have to know that we are for them enough, that our reasoning behind holding them to that standard is out of care, is out of love.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, when you talk about that, I just see myself being thrown under the bus of all the mistakes I made when I was coaching, especially when I was younger, because I think a lot of people, they coach others how they were coached. They coach others in a way that, man, my coach could. I remember walking up and down the stairs and just being ripped, and it motivated me. And then I would in return try to do that to kids. And I wasn't connecting with them because it was more, they thought I cared about them simply as a basketball player and not a person. I'm sure that's kind of what you're alluding to, right?
That's right. And what's happened is, so for years, we had it the other way, where it was way too much challenge, not enough support. And we would say you're dominating people. You're creating a culture of fear, of manipulation. And so that's where coaching culture was and leadership culture was for a long time. We could probably name names that people would recognize.
Yeah, I'm right here. Throw me.
And I had some of those as well.
Yeah.
But those, even like, it was almost an unintentional, sometimes intentional, but usually an unintentional culture of shame and anger. It's like, I didn't want to get better because of that person.
Yeah.
I wanted to be gone. I wanted to get better so I could get, but we've swung that pendulum all the way to this protector side, right? Too much support, not enough challenge. It's like, no, both are good. When you have both, like Clemson football, you walk into the locker room and it says best of standard. Well, that's a very high expectation, right? Like that means we're going to give our best effort everywhere as men in practice, on the field, in the classroom, and but there's love, there's encouragement, there's support, there's relationship. And so they want to run through a wall every single day. And they're willing to be held accountable because they know that the coaching staff is actually fighting for them. They're not against them.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you what, I loved all the guys that I coached, but they didn't always know that, right? That's where I fell short, is because deep inside, that's not my role. I'm the head coach here. I gotta hold you to a standard. You want to be friends, go see the assistant. And so there is such a balance there. So I'm sure that a lot of people still make that mistake, and I can easily see why. I want to jump into. I know there's been 3 books, but here your most recent one, Keep Chopping Wood. I know we talked a little bit before. I would always say chisel to the rock, and even had an assistant then whose dad always said keep chopping wood. So that was his saying. So I love it. What can somebody expect when reading this book? What are some takeaways without telling us everything?
Yeah, the big idea is, and I'll give you kind of the story behind it is, so I live in Oklahoma City, and it was January of this year, 2020. And Saturday night, sitting on the couch with my wife, we're watching TV. It's probably 10 o'clock or so. And we live in a historic neighborhood in Oklahoma City. So that just means old homes, 100 years old. And our neighbor actually has a wood burning fireplace. And so I could smell his fireplace, and I was like, oh, I love that smell. My brain is weird. You're probably similar. Like, I Googled what's the process of wood from like tree to fireplace. And my wife's like, what are you doing? I'm like, don't worry about it. Just keep watching TV. And so I realized that the process, my neighbor's like 70 years old, so he wasn't chopping wood anyway. But that wood that he put in his fireplace was not wood from that day, right? Like, nobody went out and chopped that wood that day. The process is that you chop it, and it has to sit for 9 to 12 months, sometimes longer, in order to be useful, in order to be ready, in order to be seasoned, to dry out. If you don't wait, you're throwing wood that's not ready for the fire into your fireplace, and it's going to get really smoky. It's not actually going to catch fire or burn the way you want it to. If it does anything, it'll probably burn your house down by damaging your fireplace, and just be a nightmare because it wasn't ready. But if you have patience, which is what I realized to me, I'm like, man, that means somebody's out chopping wood in March, in February, in April, knowing they're not going to use it until December.
That's good.
So like, they're out doing the work today, like, and there's no real benefit other than you're living out your commitments and your values.
Yeah.
It's like, man, we're not going to use this for 9 months. And so the idea is like, if the process of becoming great, the process of achieving anything, it's like we live in a drive-through culture, right? And we want everything now. I can, on the way to the office, I could drive through and get money, get clothes, get food, get whatever I want. You don't drive through and become great. It's a process. And so committing to that process, showing up each day and chopping wood.
Man, that's great. What would you say as the author in writing that book and that entire process for you? Any takeaways for you personally, or anything that maybe you weren't aware of?
Well, I wrote it for me because I'm not that person.
Oh, interesting.
I'm impatient. I'm all about the vision. I'm very I want it today. Discipline is not how I'm naturally wired. And so we talk about self-awareness, talking about knowing yourself. Like, I've learned that over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Like, I'm just not a disciplined person, and I can't be disciplined to this level, right? Because then I just wouldn't be me. But I don't have to. Let's go on a scale of 1 to 10. I can't be a 9 out of 10.
Okay.
But I can't just be a 2 out of 10 and say, well, that's just who I am.
Yeah.
No, like, I can get to a 4 or 5. Well, then what happens? And so what happens to my influence? What happens to impact? And so this idea of, I just get really impatient building things. And so it was more of a reminder for me of like, no, there's a process, and you don't have to love the process. You just have to commit to the process. And so it's almost a daily reminder for me of like, hey, if you say you're about this, you've got to be about it every day, right? Everyone talks about it. You've got to live it every single day. And so, but it's been really fascinating to see, again, my world is obviously mostly sports, but I've had calls. Like yesterday, I was on a call with Universal Resorts. Like, their teams are reading the book. I've had insurance companies, school systems, construction companies. And so that's been the really fun part of realizing like that phrase applies everywhere, right? Whether you're sports, my boys, right? They're 11, 9, and 4. Now my 4-year-old doesn't really count, but my 11 and 9-year-old, like, they read it, they took notes on it, because it's a 30-minute read, to make it
That's
really
cool.
simple for people. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, other than the obvious book here, is there any book or podcast? Just, I guess, a couple personal questions before we get into rapid fire. Any book or podcast, and we'll get to more of yours, but any other than yours that you've taken in that us listening should take in?
Yeah, 2 books I think have been really critical for me. One is my business partner, Jeremy Kubicek and Steve Cockrum. They wrote a book last year called The 100X Leader. It's kind of the foundation of all we do. The idea is, how healthy are you as a leader, 0 to 100, because you can't give what you don't possess, right? If you're not healthy leader, you're not going to have healthy teams. And the X is about multiplication. Like, what are you multiplying into the people around you? So that's just been a really critical and important book for me in my life and in my leadership. And then one, I'm sure it's probably mentioned on the show before, but Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Best.
Again, because I'm not a disciplined person, he broke it down for disciplined idiots, and just like the science behind developing habits. It's a top 3 for me.
Easily.
I'll probably read it 20 times, and get something different out of it every time. And so that book, I've recommended it to every leader I've worked with for the past 2 years. I mean, it's that good.
Same here. And in fact, I'm getting ready to go through the 3rd time and do it with a book club with a bunch of guys who haven't read it. And yeah, that newsletter, when it came yesterday again, I'm baffled at the simplicity, yet how deep and profound it's unbelievable. Yeah. So he's
what a lesson that is for us, right? Cause like we try to make everything so convoluted and complex, mostly to make ourselves seem smart. It was like, man, simple wins every single day. Simple wins.
So good. One other thing I'd just be interested in, Kevin, just high level achievers like yourself. What do you do to grow as a leader? Like, what are some of the things you have incorporated in your daily life? And, are you a podcast guy? Are you a reader? What are some of those things?
I go through seasons. I love podcasts. And I go through seasons where I listen to them, and I'll go through a year where I won't listen to a single one. This season probably been more because I've just been driving more, and that's usually when I listen to them. But I've tried to put some routine. I'm not a big routine guy just by nature, but I see the value. So I'm trying to be disciplined in routines. So for the past probably 4 or 5 years, like I've got a morning routine. I do the same thing every morning, and it's not about waking up, at 4 o'clock and running a marathon and killing a lion and scaling a mountain, and, whatever. But it's what you do when you wake up. I've realized that the successful people I've interviewed, read about, researched, however we want to define success, mornings matter. Like what they do in the morning there's just a consistent thing. So I've got a morning routine, and I'll read for a little bit. I've got an identity statement that I read every morning, just 3 to 4 sentences of like, just centering, like, hey, this is who you are. This is what you're about. The world's going to tell you a boatload of things today, but remember, this is who you are, what you're for. And then lately I've started, this probably a month, 2 months. I got the app, make sure I get it right. I think it's called Day One. Yep. It's free, I believe. But every day, so part of my morning routine now is after I do all that stuff, and I'm talking routine is like 10, 15 minutes. This is not a 2 to 3 hour thing. I go into Day One and I just type in 10 things that I'm grateful for.
I love it.
Trying to start the day with gratitude. So that's been a really, really critical thing for me. I love to read. And I'm really big on, I've got a group of people that I'll just consistently seek advice from. Because my tendency, and I try to say I a lot instead of we, or I'm learning to say I a lot, because we do this. Well, we may not do this. I do this thing. I can easily get stuck listening to my own voice too often. And so I've just got a bunch of people around me who are older and wiser, who I consistently go to them and say, hey, what do you think about this? Should I do this? And I just listen to them. I told them, if I'm going to come seek your advice, I'm going to listen to you. I'm not just going to make this seem like I want wisdom. Like I'm going to go seek out wisdom and try to implement it. So I think having a group of mentors who will be honest has been really, really critical for my growth. Yeah. And that probably goes back to your high level of self-awareness that we talked about earlier as a leader. And probably if we said this once on here, we might say it every episode, like life's hard. You can't do it alone. We all have a story. We all have a struggle. And so finding, a group of people around you is so crucial. So thanks for bringing that up. Well, we're going to go into rapid fire somewhat to finish. You can take a little bit longer if you want. How is we call this 3-pointers. How's your basketball jumper? Dude, right now it's not good. Okay. It's embarrassing. But we're in basketball season, so I'll be out with my boys
get it back, right?
over the next few months.
All right.
But it's not good right now. It's embarrassing.
All right. Well, number one.
Especially as a shooter. That was my thing.
Yeah, right. You're spot up in the corner.
God, well, you went right for it, man. That's rough.
Hey, we will let you knock them down right now. I'm going to dish to you, and you can knock them down here and make some shots. Number one, if people could learn one thing from this talk and just kind of grab hold of it, what would you want it to be?
Know yourself better than you know anyone else.
It's good. Good. If you could have stepped into my shoes today and asked Kevin DeShazo a question, what question would have you asked that I did not ask?
Maybe what's your biggest failure?
Good. I talk about that a lot. You care to talk, or just kind of enlighten us on it a little bit?
Yeah. So I left the corporate world, I don't know when, 10, 11 years ago, extremely successful, and the ego that I would be successful doing my own thing, and made $0 for a year. and then started a second company, made $0 for a year. So made $0 for 2 straight years. And it's just, those are those moments that you figure out who you really are and what you really value and what you're really made of. And a reminder, like whatever you faced, you've overcome it.
Yeah, that's great.
Right? You and I both sit here like we've overcome every obstacle we've ever faced. We'll overcome everything else.
Good. Thank you for sharing. And then finally, good stuff is the name of this. Just something I say, and just something that I feel people need more of, right? Is good stuff. So what's some good stuff you could leave us with? Anything you feel is appropriate for this time in general, or just good stuff that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think if you're listening to this right now, we're in the midst of wild, crazy chaos, right? And it's really easy to go negative. Keep believing, keep going up. I'm not going to say keep chopping wood because that'd be too easy, but keep believing, right? Like optimists change the world. And so like we need you, especially if you consider yourself a leader, if you are in a leadership role, and I would say if you're a human, you are a leader of something. We need you at your best. We need you believing at your best, showing up at your best, especially in this season. So whatever you have to do to get into the right mindset, to believe in yourself, to believe in the people around you, to believe that better days are not only coming, but that we can create them today. We need you in that headspace and doing that work.
Hey man, good stuff. You went 3 for 3, you knocked them down. So 9 points there about it. Well, hey, I know you have a ton of avenues here, from the podcast to the books, to the social media, to the websites. Can you kind of tell us where all those are, please, so our listeners can follow?
Absolutely. If you want to just follow me on whatever social media platform, it's just at Kevin DeShazo. The book, easiest way to find it is on Amazon, but you just go to keepchoppingwood.com. There's some bulk order bonuses, some different things, links to Amazon. So that's probably the easiest. Those two probably work.
Hey man, I really appreciate you being here with us today, Kevin. This was great. I have a lot of admiration and respect for what you do. There's days where I open up that Twitter timeline and you speak right to me. So keep doing what you're doing. I do think everything is aligned with making people better. So I appreciate your insight and just being vulnerable and transparent on here today. It was a lot of fun spending some time with you.
I loved it, man. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no problem. Well, hey, as always, there are nuggets galore in here and the things that you can do. It's one thing to listen to it. It's another thing to apply it. You can't maybe do everything, but you can do something. So highly suggest you take a listen and go back and dive into what some of those things are that Kevin speaks to today, and find a way to make those applicable in your life. So thanks again for joining us. Till next time, good stuff.